Your attention, please.
Hello! Welcome back inside the Park from Air broadcast number 929. The Chinese Grand Prix review. It's
No, Todd, not now.
Hey, you know what we do on race review weekends?
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it.
That's exactly what we do on race weekends. And this weekend, we're talking about the Chinese Grand Prix. But before I talk about the Chinese Grand Prix, I introduce my co-host. You know what that means.
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy. It's...
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
It's Paul.
Hello.
Hey.
I thought you were going to say, and broadcasting from 920 gigahertz from the studio. I don't know what that's from, but it's from something.
Yeah, it was. Or 50,000 watts
50,000 watts of power.
Yeah. It's not the wattage, Paul. It's the amperage that'll get you.
Ooh,
so, a little less.
Saucy.
And never become an alternate path to ground. That's another important one. So, Paul, just 48 hours, you and I were breaking bread and drinking a very nice bottle of wine.
We were. It was good times, right?
It was good times. Yeah. Paul was in town. He flew in. He's like a thief in the night.
Yep.
Flew in, hobnobbed a little bit, and then he
kept
flew
it
right
quiet
back.
on social media. Didn't want there to be a lot of people at the
right.
airport and stuff, you know.
Yeah, big line at the airport and the gate waiting for the autographs. I know. It's,
The little people with the flags. Hey,
yeah,
crying, crying.
Yeah,
That's great.
Don't leave us, Paul. Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah, very rare. But Paul and I, it was always a big emotion. Paul and I were able to spend the evening with our better halves and had a nice dinner and very Mediterranean restaurant. It was very good.
Yeah, nice little small plates, little drinks, tried a couple of 2-3 things. It was good.
Yeah. What was the
what
wine,
I like
Paul?
to do, I don't remember now. Oh, what type of wine was it?
Yeah.
I don't remember now.
I don't either. We didn't have that much.
It was red.
It was red.
I said, give me
Italian.
the red one. Oh, Primitivo.
Primitivo. That was it. It was a Primitivo. Yes, it was very good. Yeah.
You guys fought me on that one for a while.
Oh, I didn't.
Like, how about Primitivo? Well, no. Maybe some wine, bubbly. No.
Let's go with a Fume Blanc. Yay.
The Stella Rosa Blackberry.
Yeah. Yes. Well, Paul, the Chinese Grand Prix was held this weekend, and wasn't it ripe with drama and
controversy?
Yes, it certainly was. A lot of controversy coming out of this weekend. A lot of Monday morning couch sitters with lots of opinions on social media. Good heavens. And we'll get into some of that. But let's jump into the race review because, that's what you all tuned in for. You don't want to hear about Paul and I having a great evening and drinking nice wine. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
All right, let's do a little formation lap, do a little table setting here. The interesting part of this weekend was the resurfacing providing so much more grip, right? So much so that Pirelli mandated increase of tire pressure to protect the carcass of the tire. Such were the increased loads on those tires because of the grip levels that the cars were getting. Also, keep in mind, we've seen this before, Paul. We've seen several older tracks go through resurfacing. Coda comes to mind, and different things, and they've resurfaced these in the past. And usually, it's kind of interesting because it and a lot of times the track will be really slippery. The bitumen's there, the oil's still coming out of the bitumen, and it can be really slippery. But this is quite the opposite scenario, right? Provided a tremendous amount of grip. So I don't know if the team, maybe the teams knew that heading into it. Certainly Pirelli did. They didn't bring softer compounds. And many argued they should have brought it a step harder because of it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously they'll go there ahead of time and get measurements and things like that. But it's weird, right? You'd think all the tracks in all the world that they build, sometimes you get them and they become a nightmare like Road America it was when they repaved it. But then, Laguna Seca, Sonoma, the same thing. They actually, first laps out there, there's a ton more grip. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe need a little convention or something of racetrack asphalt makers or something, so everyone understands what the hell happens here. But definitely, depending on the region and who's doing it, there can be all kinds of different scenarios after a repaving.
Maybe all those tracks need to import some bitumen from Kent.
Yes, that's where the special bitumen is.
That's the special stuff. That's right. Saturday showed the teams what could be achieved on mediums, but no team ran the hards, and all teams, I think, headed into Sunday assuming that the hard compound was going to be a good race tire on Sunday. Ferrari had the pace and tire management to win the sprint. Lewis Hamilton won that. It was a great result for Lewis, for sure. But the qualifying for the actual race had me wondering a little bit, as Ferrari didn't place it. So they went from winning the sprint to not qualifying as well, and it was making me wonder what kind of changes they had made to try to assist maybe their medium compound tire wear rates. Was it degradation, graining? All the teams are going to be taking all those elements and all those lessons learned from Saturday and try to adjust setups to accommodate for Sunday. Still not really knowing how the hard compounds would work out, assuming that they would be the preferred race tire during that time. Lewis said that after the race, they actually did make those changes, but it kind of sent the car backwards for him on Sunday, as evidenced. Other teams seem to make adjustments that may have moved them forward. I think of, namely, maybe McLaren. And although I will say that Lando struggled more this weekend with the car's performance than Oscar did, the graining on the front left tire was a major concern heading into the race, irrespective of, because they knew they were going to be on mediums at some point, and there were a lot of teams having graining. So I think that had to be a challenge as you head into Sunday, Paul, for all the teams. That none of them ran hards. Wasn't sure how those would play out. Assumed a harder compound would be better on this more abrasive surface. Maybe not as bad as graining, but how do you accommodate for the medium stint that you got to run at some point? Tough strategies. Yeah,
it is, and the new track will have a bigger evolution than ever, and it's hard to, because it's a new track. Some tracks we go to in America anyway, we kind of know how the evolution of a weekend goes. It's pretty much, you got the data, but here it's a new surface, a track that no one ever tests at or goes to, and so the evolution is also unpredictable. So there's various things you can obviously do in the setup to help the tire, save the tire, play around with camber and all kinds of things. But so it's still a bit more of a guessing game at races like this than it would be with some of those European tracks that the teams know very, very well after years and years of running on.
Yeah, and I also think just for those newer to racing, Paul, I think the parallel is the same for you at Aston Martin and IMSA as it might be, or Le Mans as it might be in Formula One. But you guys all run Michelins, and if they have the mandated tire pressures you got to run and all that sort of thing, and so if not long before the race they came back to you, Paul, and said, "Hey, track's pretty abrasive. Going to need you to up your PSIs by a pound." Yeah,
that's major.
That's a big deal, isn't it?
It's a very, very big deal. Yeah, because you're going to have to adjust everything. In IMSA, they actually give you options for your tire pressure, but it also goes alongside the camber of the tire, right? So you can, the more stood up the camber is, the less tire pressure you can run. But the more camber you got in, you got to up that pressure a little bit to protect the tire. So we have a little bit of wiggle room there. The F1 teams probably don't, but the scenario is the same. You start playing around with the tire pressures, everything is about hitting that sweet spot with the pressure and having the car come in tune at that point. And so it's still a guessing game, which F1 people don't like to do, right? So
right.
They like to have all the data points figured out.
I got to think, it's hard enough to get the tires and the chassis in the window for the ultimate performance window for that tire, and then when you change it by a pound, it's like, where's that window now?
It'll protect the tire, but your performance will go downwards, right? So you got to try and figure out how to adapt to that tire pressure where it doesn't take away the performance that if you didn't do anything, you would achieve. So it is difficult. It's a black art, these tires. They still is. So sometimes it takes a Nui kind of mind, not just looking at the data points, because you don't have the data to actually work from. You got to look at historical things with your chassis and what you understand about it and how it works to know what adjustments can be made to limit that performance loss.
Right. Well, let's jump into the teams and talk about how they finished. We'll start off at the top of the grid, the sharp end of the grid at McLaren. You had Lando Norris in P2, Oscar Piastri taking the win. So Oscar was on pole, converted that pole, ran relatively lonely race, if I'm honest, out in front. No brake issues for him. The pace, he had pace in hand, good tire management, took the win in a P1. He got a bit of a slow start at the beginning, but was able to block Russell into turn one, hold that position, and then lead the race effectively for the win. And in the end, in my mind, Oscar's run was certainly a redemption drive. He had a very difficult home Grand Prix in Melbourne, and it was also a bit of a signal that Lando's not the only guy in this team can win races. Yeah. And I suspect Zach's going to have his hands full this year, to say the least. But a great win, just very confident drive. Never really seemed to struggle. Didn't put a foot wrong. Thankfully, didn't have the long pedal like Lando did. We'll get in a minute. But a fantastic drive from Oscar.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely redemption. I mean, everyone made so many speculations from the first race. Like everyone settled down till we get through a couple more races. That's right. That's an anomaly race nearly. So yeah, it's very important for him. He's got to keep that kind of performance going to keep can you just be number two and support Norris scenario. He's fighting as hard as he can for that never to be anything brought up at their meetings, right? So, and he did a very good job about it. And fighting into turn one with Russell, it's all to do with how you've driven in the past as to who's gonna stick their nose in and who's not. And we know Piastri is not one to be trifled with, quite honestly. Yeah. And so Russell knew he tried a little bit, but then he backed out, rightfully so. But it's got a lot to do with what you do in your historical, clashes with people. Yeah. To know what the other drivers are going to try on and what aren't they going to try on. And, and so Oscar was a winner there, and then he just controlled the race. I mean, fantastic job. Yeah. Yeah,
he really did. Things were a little tougher for Lando. He had a tough time of it, making an early pass on George. Then he got undercut by George Paul, had to come out, had to repass George, which he did. Got him back up into P2. Late in the race, though, Lando had a long brake pedal, and it got worse. It progressively got worse each lap, and it's a shame because it prevented him from having a real go at Oscar towards the end. But if you then on the flip side, if you think about it, it was probably spared us all from another papaya rules nonsense situation. So yay, long brake pedal. Yeah. But that's unnerving, to be sure. Lando limped it home just ahead of George by doing a lot of engine braking and lifting coasting on the final lap. So very lucky to retain P2 for McLaren's 50th 1-2 in their F1 history. I think, Paul, you've raced in situations where you hit the brake pedal and didn't have them.
Yes, I have.
And that's pretty scary, it seems.
It's extremely scary. Yes, you just hope you don't hit something super hard when it happens. Yeah, it's definitely happened to me a couple of times, honestly. The next worst thing to being on fire, quite in my historical fact, anyway. But I think there must have been something going on with the rear calipers or something, because they obviously knew, they've got the sensors on there. They can sense that there's lower pressure in the line, so there must have been a small leak there. But Norris's dismissal of it initially was a little disturbing, I would say. And they need to talk to them about that. Remember when they were talking about, pulling over for Oscar and him holding off, and when they start talking about critical things on the car, you've just got to give it up. Yeah. You can't just think you're going to supersede they're not going to tell you that because they don't mean it. Right. And you've got to take it seriously. And it could really have ended up with 0 points. I mean, he lost the brakes with 1 lap to go. But what if he lost them with 2 laps to go? He's not in the points anymore. So,
right.
he did. I think he did a poor job in reacting to the requests from the team, and they shouldn't sit there begging over the radio and tell them all the issues that could happen if he's not, responding to it. I think that's a weakness in him.
Yeah, and overarching, he could have been out of the points or worse.
Right. Could have crashed
no
the
brakes,
car.
Could have crashed the car.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, obviously it happened to Alonso, and I know you don't want to give it up, but you've got to react to these things. There was a significant issue with it, which obviously cropped up on the last lap, that, he should have just given it up and protected his second place and moved on. That's what you have to do to win a championship. You can't just throw all hell to the wind to win a race when you can secure second points and go fight next week. I understand he's not happy about Piastri beating him, nor should he be. But, you lose how many points you get for second place nowadays. I think it's 154. I don't know, something like that. But, that could be the critical points that win or lose your championship against your teammate. So.
Yeah, it really could. Next up is Mercedes. You had George Russell in P3, Kimi Antonelli in P6. George started second, lost a spot to Lando early. It lost it twice, actually, and then marched off for what's becoming what I call one of George's patented quiet podium finishes. It's just it's 2 podiums, 2 third places in a row on 2 races. And George said P3 was the max, as they didn't have the pace to match McLaren, but he felt he would have gotten Lando if there was another lap, and that's probably
true.
Thereabouts. Yeah, that's probably true. George has 2 P3 so far this season, and said that while he would like to race his race for, let me try this in English. He would like for his race to be with the McLarens. Mercedes just isn't quick enough right now, and it's just not the case. So bringing home a P3 for him really felt like he extracted the maximum out of the car. I don't want to wax poetic or make something out that's not, but very consistent first 2 races, markedly different conditions. Not as fast as McLaren, but there again, George is thereabouts, puts it in P3 ahead of Max. I think it's a great result for George.
It is, and I mean, you got to make what you have and make the most of it, and he's definitely done that. And he does. We don't know. I mean, certainly the Mercedes is closer to the front than it was last year at this time.
Yeah.
So he's just got to wait it out, and hopefully they can turn that car around where it can start fighting the McLaren. It's not far off. But
if the driver execution's there, Paul, and he's executing, all he really needs to do is have the patience to wait for them to develop the car.
Right, exactly. So I mean, that's all he can do. He can do the most he can do, and I think he really has done the most he can do. He's been pretty feisty out there, and he doesn't, he did pass Lando. He's calculated risks on the passes and the maneuvers and when to fight. So I think he's done a superb job for that team. Now that he's the number one, there's a lot of pressure on him for that, but he certainly hasn't let him down.
No, he's risen to the challenge. That's for sure. His teammate, rookie Kimi Antonelli, had a very good race to come from the back and secure points in P6. The fans voted him driver of the day for his efforts, which surprised him and me, if I'm honest. He actually had floor damage on his car from lap 1, and the team didn't tell him that until after the race. So he struggled with the rear quite a bit, and he wasn't expecting that. So he said it was actually a really good learning experience for him to have to drive a full dry race, dealing with an issue and learning how to deal with issues like that. So he kind of took it as a learning experience for him.
Yeah, it's interesting they wouldn't tell him.
Yeah, I found that interesting too.
That's a psychological game sometimes the teams do, because they're always not ready for that. Because if you get this idea that something's wrong with the car, you get it in your head, and then that's your excuse on a plate for not performing. It could be, you could take it both ways, really. Say, oh, well, that's a good thing not to tell him, let him feel it out. The other thing is, he's a professional, he's in Formula One, he's in a top team. You should give him all the information that is available. Don't hide things from him. Man, I tell you, that happened to me a few times, and it just threw me livid. It's like, no, give me the information. If I
let
can't
me know
handle
what
the
I'm working
information,
around.
yeah, let me know what I need to achieve, what's going on. If I can't do it, then fire me,
Right.
but don't hide things for me and try and think you can second guess and play a psychological game. So I don't like that. I understand why they did it, but in my view, I don't like people doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. He said that one of his focuses is qualifying right now, and he's gonna work on that, try to do better there, so he starts closer to the sharp end, doesn't have to fight his way through traffic. And I think all the drivers could say the same. But he's a rookie, and that's one area of focus he's identified for himself. Still, irrespective, Mercedes running second in the Constructors' Championship against McLaren, so. They're doing a great job. They really are. And you could argue, well, it's because Ferrari's stubbing their toe for the first two races, and Red Bull looks, off the pace. And so they've backed into P2. But I think George has delivered 2 podiums. Kimi's done a great job first 2 races. So I don't think it's luck. I just think it's a lot of hard work, and they're doing great.
Yeah. I mean, I would have liked Kimi to get rid of Tsunoda quicker.
Yeah.
That really affected him charging forward. Maybe the damage was such that it made it difficult, but I don't know. But the good thing is he's not throwing it off the road to make something happen. So he was patient, even though not maybe cutthroat enough to get rid of Yuki quickly, which is definitely something he'll need to do in the future.
Yeah, well, according to the social media outrage over Liam Lawson, nobody can beat Tsunoda. I hope that's true.
Yeah.
Let's see. Speaking of Red Bull, Liam Lawson, what was he down in P12? Is that right? Inherited a couple spots there. Verstappen in P4.
In purgatory, I think, is where he finished.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. This has been a big talking point out of this weekend is Liam. All the silly social media ire has switched from Jack Doohan to Liam Lawson now with clickbait headlines. I mean, a couple hours after the race, I saw, German media reports that Liam's already out for the Japanese Grand Prix, and Ralf Schumacher said, well, here's another thing I find weird. People for 10, 12, 15 years couldn't care less what Ralf Schumacher thinks about Formula One or anyone in the paddock, right?
Yeah.
What happened all of a sudden? Well, now everybody's hanging on his every word. I mean, it's like, who cares what Ralf has to say about Liam Lawson?
Right.
It's like, oh no, what Ralf said. Really? I mean, who cares?
Yeah.
Crazy. I don't understand. That's why all of a sudden is Ralf Schumacher.
Him and Jacques Villeneuve are kept in the blue room.
Come
on, things are getting a little dull. Let's bring them out and entertain the troops.
Yeah, I know. Come out and say something pithy. Okay. Really strange.
Yeah.
So anyway, you've got all this, social media going crazy. Who knows if any of that's true? So let's just talk about what we do know.
What do we know?
Well, what we know is like Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, Daniel Ricciardo, Sergio Perez, Liam's struggling to come to grips with this car, the way the car performs. I don't think that's any mystery, right? It's a very, very difficult car to drive. And I think there was a great interview by Jake over at High Performance when they were talking to Alex. And he very succinctly lays out what the challenge is there with that car. About how Max likes that car. It's developed the way Max likes it, and the way that makes Max as quick as he is. That's how it's developed. And Max likes that way, and he can handle a nervous rear end in favor of an incredibly sharp front end, right? And all the other drivers I mentioned struggle to replicate Max's ability with a car like this. The team you and I talked about in the last podcast. The team's gonna develop the car the way Max wants it, right? It's because he's a 4-time champion and an extremely rare talent in F1. So that's what they're going to do. Now there's some downside to doing that, and they're living through it right now, right? And this leaves them trying to find another driver in their program or outside who can also manage a car like this, and also, that can not penalize them in the Constructors' Championship. Right. So that's the difficult thing. It's a conundrum. I find it fascinating as they could try to develop the car a bit more with a bit more balance, a little easier to drive with less front end and sharpness. But that isn't where Max is quickest. Mm-hmm. So do you sacrifice the constructor's title effort in favor of the driver's title for Max? Do you start thinking longer term if rumors of Max leaving next year are to be believed? There's no easy answer for Red Bull at this point. And I'm sure Christian will say that they need to continue to develop for Max and see what they can do to help their other driver get on top of the car. It's been this complete deluge of social media outrage, not just, silly opinion, but it's just a lot of people are just outraged on Yuki's behalf and how they, okay. So Red Bull, who's had Yuki in the program for several years, had Liam in the program several years. You're saying that they don't know anything about either two drivers, that they didn't feel that Liam was more long-term, maybe a better fit for Red Bull than Yuki was. And if that's the case, I guess, Paul, I'd say, okay, toss Yuki in for 2 races. You have 2 races, only 2 races. And if you don't finish on Max's tail or beat him, you're out.
Yeah.
Is that the litmus test we're going for now?
I think that would be unfair doing it right now. Because, you're going to base it on Liam's performance in the first 2 races. And I would imagine Yuki could, do better than that. And then he's secured, but is that the final? It's a Red Bull problem, not a driver problem. I really think it is. I think it's the inability of that team to be able to develop 2 cars simultaneously in different directions. And I understand that they wouldn't compromise what Max is doing, because you can't. You can't ignore that. But they should be able to help develop the car. Now, the problem is for Liam is he doesn't have a lot of experience.
Yeah.
So him developing the car without test days, in the old days, they would have been out somewhere for 5 days at some track,
and
just sent Liam out there and just figure it out, Liam. Right. You would figure it out. And you'd either figure it out that Liam would figure out how to drive it, or they'd figure out a direction that Liam's comfortable with. They can take that kind of setup and use it at the next race. But those options are gone. So, he has to show up on race weekend every time, jump in the car, and then, as I said, he doesn't have a lot of background knowledge of the Formula One car, certainly not that team, in how to go in his own direction, which I said would probably be the only way he could be successful there, is to go in his own direction, unless for whatever reason he loves driving a car like Max does, and obviously he doesn't. But we saw Sergio at the back of the grid.
Yeah.
Sergio wasn't a slouch either. It's a team problem, and they either need to accept the fact that they're throwing away the second driver for whatever Max can do, or they can try and get their head around it and try and figure out how to support a second driver properly.
Right.
I think it's too soon to make that switch. Because I don't think they're going to learn either way. They're just going to basically just destroy Liam's career, but they don't really care about that so much. Problem is, it's Japan, and they would be very excited to have Yuki in the car in Japan. So I think
it's a lot of pressure for Yuki, though.
It is, but I think for them, if it was another track, I think it was less likely Yuki might get that chance. I think it's more likely because it's Japan.
Yeah, it could be.
He's got experience of that track a lot. The crowd are behind him. If he's not succeed there, he's, who knows where. So I think Liam's in a bad spot. I don't think it's a Liam problem because he performed really well in the sister car against Yuki. So,
Yuki's been in the press saying, I'm ready to do it. I'm quicker, blah, blah, blah. And Liam said, well, Yuki can say whatever he wants to say, but I raced against him a lot in the junior series and I beat him every time. So whatever.
Right. And, I don't think Yuki's the answer either, really. So, but whatever. But
problem is I don't know who is.
I don't know, and there's no way of knowing because how do you figure out who can drive like Max Verstappen? I don't know. Maybe Kimi Antonelli, but he's always locked up.
Yeah, and maybe that's, I mean, isn't that part of the narrative? I mean, what that would suggest is you're dealing with an incredibly rare talent here.
Oh, well,
in Max.
absolutely you are.
I mean, my gosh,
Yeah.
How do you replicate that? Well, Max Verstappens aren't just falling off trees.
Right.
You could have 5 people in your junior program and none of them could be on par with Max. Right. Yeah. So, they've already cycled through Alex and Pierre and Daniel and Sergio. Mm-hmm. None of those guys are horrible drivers. None of them.
No.
Right? And they couldn't get there. Liam gets there. And no offense to Yuki, if they do swap Yuki, I think it's, okay, put him in for 2 races. And if he's not there, out, give him the same chance that you're giving Liam. 2 races, really? On the flip side of that, it'd be great if they put Yuki in and he beats Max, but I just don't see that happen.
Yeah, I just think if you put Yuki in Lawson's, he's done. He's toast.
Yeah.
And I said that maybe they don't care about that. I don't think they do.
Maybe not.
But
yeah, they may not.
But I think they need to at least let him get another couple of races under his belt before
I agree.
Making that decision. I'll admit I'm surprised at how poor he's been doing.
Yeah, me too.
But there's a lot going on back there.
Yeah, there is.
Both in the car and outside the car for him. So, give him a little leniency, but it's very, when you hear the reporters talking as they do, it's definitely going to interfere with confidence to perform. So tough place to be. For sure.
It is. Yeah, he finished 15th. I think he inherited P12 as the team tried a series of suspension changes. And they were going to harvest a lot of data from that, which Christian said they did to see if that would help Liam. Lawson said it didn't.
Well, that's good. Okay.
Yeah. Liam said, we tried a radical different suspension setup. That's why I started from pit lane. Mm-hmm. We collected a lot of data about the car and for the team about the car, but for me too. And he said, unfortunately, it just didn't work. But now they have a lot of good data. This is what Christian said. They have a lot of good data. They'll sit down, they'll plow through it, and they'll see what they want to do. So, I don't know. Early days, I think 2 races in Australia was a bizarre race. I think that's a little harsh.
Yeah.
I hope I'm proven wrong. All these people saying, that Yuki is the guy to beat Max Verstappen. I don't think so. It'd be great if I was wrong and they put him in and he's faster than Max. I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
And it would be a shame to put him in and then go to the balance of the season with him struggling at the back when that could have been Liam, because now you're just ruining Liam's career over this deal, right? And you could argue, well, by not putting Yuki in, you're ruining his career. And I get it. But difficult situation. Ultimately, I think you're spot on, Paul. This is a team issue. It's not a driver issue. And this team needs to figure this out. They're smart people. They need to figure it out. Max had been foreshadowing the car's deficit all weekend in the press. So to see him reel in the wounded Leclerc for P4 is a sign that maybe the hards with the lower fuel level, Max found a lot of pace in that. And the car suited his liking once the fuel level burned down, got the hards on, didn't have the graining that they had on Saturday. So, there's a lesson there, I think, for the team. Ultimately, the first stint on heavy fuel and mediums and boxing him early to avoid traffic, I think could be part of the reason that cost him a podium finish. Difficult to say, but just my guess. But anyway, finishing P4, he said that it's what it is. And he said, we just drove to the pace that we knew we could have. And the car got a lot better on the hards late in the race. And I was able to claw up to 4th.
Yeah. So, that's once again, data's good for him. He's kind of doing the same thing that Russell's doing, biding his time till the team figure out the car. And,
that's exactly right.
He's second in the Drivers' Championship still, which is kind of surprising when you think about it, but that's where he is. So, don't count him out. Don't count him out at all.
No, I wouldn't. All right, Ferrari.
Shouldn't we be talking about them last?
Yeah, well, they did finish here on the track.
All right. Cheating.
But
not good enough, damn it, not good enough.
Ferrari, Charles Leclerc disqualified. Lewis Hamilton disqualified. Charles and Lewis made contact at the start for the second race in a row, which supports my notion, Paul. Remember me saying this in the season preview that if anyone thinks that Charles is going to roll over for Lewis, he didn't for Sebastian. They had several comings together, and I think Lewis has got a bit of a tiger by the tail here. So Charles not about to roll over, and this is 2 clashes in 2 races. So we'll see. The clash removed the front end plate from Charles's car on the left side of the car, and when he hit Lewis. And they chose not to change that during the stop. They said he was 30 points down on aero, but he was quick, incredibly quick with a damaged wing, quicker than Lewis, right? So much so that Lewis even, radioed and said, look, I think Charles is a lot quicker. I think I'm going to move over. Let's swap cars and let him in. And then unfortunately, FOM didn't carry that radio call. They just carried all the subsequent.
When I'm good and ready.
When I'm damn well and ready, which created a bunch of drama, which wasn't the case. I think Lewis recognized
Drive to Survive editing.
It totally was in real time, it was silly that Fred even had to defend that. That was silly. So Charles did swap, ran up in P4, then got passed by Max late in the race as Max recovered. Charles said that he really felt like he had a really good car and that he had the pace to battle the front runners for the win. But the wing issue really kind of put his race to bed at that point, and he finished P5. But then he was disqualified after they determined that the car was underweight by 1 kilogram. And that was with a new wing refitted. So, with the proper body weight, or body front wing weight. And then they drained the fuel and it was 1 kilogram under. So he was disqualified. Now the team's assumption is that by staying on a 1-stopper, they'd planned a 2-stopper, but by remaining on a 1-stopper, the tire wear was the culprit here as his weight issue. I let you guys be the judge. That's it was 1 kilogram. What's that? 2.2 pounds. So lost 2.2 pounds of rubber. And there you go, Paul. That's I guess you don't account for 1 or 2 stoppers in your strategy, huh?
Yeah, you definitely should. You don't want to take it that fight. I mean, I don't know. I said it was bad when it happened to Russell. It's bad when it happens to Charles. That's just bad mathematics over there. You've got to give yourself that leeway. And margin, you just have to, taking it down to that degree where, and if you're saying, okay, we did these calculations, but now we know how much a tire weighs if it's done this many laps and this much rubber's gone off it. By our calculations, we're going to be short. They should also have seen that, and if so, they should have brought him in, pitted for tires. Yes, he would have lost the position to Lewis, but also yes, Ferrari would have had points on the table. So they 2 missteps there. One, not accounting for it, and one, even if they were accounting for it, not reacting to it and understanding the scenario. So shame on them.
Yeah, it's a little weird. Your strategy and setup, fuel load, all of that should account for whether you do opt plan A or plan B.
Yeah.
Right. It just seems like a bit of a, I don't know. At this level, trying to fight for wins in the Constructors' Championship, you can't have these.
No.
Things were compounded, made worse. Lewis said that the setup changes they tried between Saturday and Sunday didn't work. And early on, I felt like Lewis was just managing his tires and controlling things as Charles was on his tail. But I do think once Lewis moved to the hard compounds, he struggled more, and the team boxed him again for fresh tires as he was coming under pressure from Max. So that was unfortunate that the setup changes they made kind of went backwards for Lewis. Unfortunately, he ran out of laps to catch up with Charles to make the pass for P5. It's interesting that his hard compounds were wearing a lot while others weren't as much. So interesting issue as Saturday, he managed the tires perfectly. Those were mediums. But, we kind of talk about Lewis and his tire management abilities, and
Yeah.
that was kind of interesting that he got caught out like that. I'm not suggesting his fault. I'm just saying that didn't seem anticipated from my standpoint. But
Yeah.
like Charles, he was disqualified due to the skid block infringement, and we're talking like the thickness of a credit card here,
I
folks.
know, it's
but
crazy.
it is. It's maddening as
Yeah.
a pure metric, but the assumption is they were running the car too low to the ground. You gain a
Yeah.
fit, and they've got to put a number somewhere, and that has to be the number.
Right, happened to Penske as well,
Yeah.
if you remember, in the GTP cars, and there was a lot of
Yeah.
uproar about that too, because when you do mention how little amount it is, but that's you're in or you're out, unfortunately. You know, maybe they changed the rake on the car and dropped the rear a little bit and just didn't account for extra wear on the plank, or the skid block or whatever. So in that setup change, who knows? Because they hadn't run it before, right? So sometimes you do setup changes and it does wear things more because the car bottoms out more, or just the rake change grinds away a different portion of the car. So it sounds like that's what they got called out by, really.
Yeah. I mean, as a Ferrari fan, it's gutting, but the rules are the same for everyone.
Yep.
There is a sort of narrative in Melbourne that they were running low and they had to raise the cars because they were running too low in Melbourne, and they were scraping the hell out of the bottom.
Yeah.
And they had to raise them. And then they got a little cagey about that question in China. There was an interview with Lewis. So, well, you had to raise the cars. He goes, what? What are you talking about? I don't raise the car. No, nobody raised the car. I don't know what you're talking about. And Haas was low in Melbourne too.
Yeah.
So, I think, it's such fine margins.
It is,
Ferrari's running them down to the nearest possible because they probably, for whatever reason, their car just at a higher height just doesn't have the performance.
No car does.
No car does,
right? So every car using that ground effect underneath the tunnels, every millimeter you go lower, the more performance you get out of it, as long as you can balance it out. So it's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. So did they get caught running, sailing a little close, to the wind? Maybe.
Sounds like, yeah.
But that happens. It's unfortunate. Embarrassing? No, I just think cheating? No, I just think they were really finite on their measurements and they missed them.
Yeah, it's a little embarrassing.
Okay, fine.
Because both of them went out. Yeah,
both of them are. All right, fine, it's Ferrari, the most storied team in Formula One history, making junior league errors like this.
There you go.
What is...
Not good enough, damn it. Not good enough.
Really.
All right, let's talk about Haas. Esteban Ocon, P5, Ollie Behrman in P8. The DSQs certainly helped Haas, let's be honest. But they had a great race going, irrespective of the DSQs. Yeah. Esteban started on mediums, switched to the hards, gained some track positions for the effort. He then made the pass on Antonelli, who, of all people, in a Mercedes. In fairness, Kimi was struggling with some floor damage, moved forward, and I'd argue that, I don't want to get, emotional here, but I would argue
good.
Touchy-feely or anything on Esteban's behalf, but I would say that Esteban needed this result. Given everything he's been through with Alpine and all the eyebrows raised about moving to hired who? That sort of thing. He needed a good result. And after the first race in Australia, that didn't go well. So this was a good result for him. He needed it. The team needed it, and he delivered. I felt good on him.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was a solid deal. That's what they wanted. Obviously they lost Hulkenberg. It's exactly what they wanted him for. The experienced guy that could get the job done. And we know he can get the job done.
Yep.
Sometimes he does it in a very poor way,
Just
and doesn't get the results. Yeah, but when on a day, Ocon is very, very good, and this was one of his good days. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of redemption drives, as I mentioned earlier from Australia, Ollie desperately needed one, right? Now, he wasn't walking down the paddock in tears, and Anthony Hamilton wasn't comforting, but I'll guarantee you he
was that's a bad thing. Come on.
Oh, yeah, no, you can't say that. But I'll guarantee Ollie was pretty upset, I'm sure, in Melbourne.
Yeah.
But he had a terrific drive on Sunday. Great passes, running long on the hards. Then he boxed, gained track position, then passed his way up to the top 10, inherited P8. What did he start, down 17 or something like that?
Yeah.
For a rookie, Paul, I know same for Kimi can be said, but I think Ollie had a really good redemption drive there. Like Esteban, I think he needed this result for himself, just to build some confidence back in there. Wrecked twice in free practice and qualifying couldn't, and then it was a mess.
It makes it easy to forget the first race of the season, doesn't it? When you get a result like that.
It does. You get a Haas 1-2 and you're in the points. And you had a great recovery drive like that. And Paul, Haas had to change their rear wing because they weren't going to pass the deflection test, the new deflection test. Okay. So they had that on top of them. So a great weekend for Iowa. The whole team, all the men and women at Haas, great result, dual points. Great job.
Yeah, no, excellent job. Exactly what he needed to do.
Yeah.
Obviously came in to Formula One with a lot of fanfare because of his result that he got with the Ferrari car. And, he had some mistakes at the end of last year. He had that big crash in Brazil.
With Brazil.
Yeah. And then he followed up that with, not a great first race of the year when he's in his first year as a full-time driver, but definitely a redemption race. The most positive thing I got out of it was how he performed on the medium tire and making it last as long as he did. And I mean, when I saw him making those passes, which are a little cheeky, great passes, but his verbiage on the radio a little cheeky. But that's you need to have a little bit of that in you. But he didn't drop backwards after doing that. He managed to protect the tire also, as well as getting the performance out of it, making those moves, getting those passes done, and getting the result for the team.
Yeah, great point. That was on mediums, and everybody struggled with the mediums. So that's a great point. Another great story, Williams, Alex Albon P7, Carlos Sainz in P10. When we talk about Doohan or Lawson being off the pace of their teammate and fans calling for the replacement, no one's actually talking about Carlos, who seems to be struggling against his teammate, right? He goes, it's just Carlos Sainz. Well, he's quite a ways off Alex. Nobody's talking about that. Carlos, tough sprint, better race, but still struggled to come home in P13, which became P10 after the DSQs. And Carlos, he just said something's wrong. I'm faster than this, and he's right. He is faster than this. There's no doubt about it. I believe he is faster than that. There's no doubt. Just like I think Doohan and Lawson are faster than this too. It's just something isn't quite syncing or working right, and it just takes time to get on top of it.
That's an interesting scenario because okay, if he thinks there's something wrong, is there something wrong with the chassis? These are all new cars. They build them from scratch every year. Can they build one a little bit different? Not quite right. Sometimes you have to get deep into the chassis to find any differences, but sometimes they can be there. So I think if it continues, I would see a chassis change for Carlos because he should be right there. Albon is a great driver, but Carlos should be there, should be right there with him, if not a bit in front, right, with his experience. So
if he doesn't turn it around in the next race, where's all the social media posts about having Colapinto replace him?
Colapinto come back, come back home.
Where's that talk?
They'll figure it out. As I said, it's still a growing team, and they can make some little errors, and there's a smaller team than some of the others. So we'll see what happens there with that chassis, if it's something to do with that.
And no doubt that car behaves radically different than the Ferrari had last year. So it's going to take a little bit of time for that to gel. So I'm not beating Carlos up. I love Carlos as much as the next guy does. All right, and Alex. Which, ask my daughter. She thinks he's dreamy. Alex didn't have the best start, but he ran a long stint on mediums, which even saw him leading the race at one point. So it was a really long stint, is my point. When everybody else boxed. When he did box, he dropped backwards, but had fresher tires and made the best use of those, climbed back up to P9, which became P7 after the DSQs. A dual points finish for Williams, a great result. And, just one success after the other, and Williams is moving in the right direction. Yeah,
it was interesting, his little thing on the radio about I'm way better than these people. I got it all in hand, from whatever feedback he was getting from his engineer. It seemed to he always seems out of breath, but it just seemed like an interesting conversation he was having there.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see. Alpine, Pierre Gasly, DSQ, Jack Doohan a P15. Jack had a good weekend, I think, in aggregate. Despite the penalty for running Hadjar a little wide, I thought he did have some really good defense after that incident and held off a faster car. He did, in my opinion, my humble opinion, I'm not a Jack Doohan apologist. I'm just saying I kind of felt like he did what we've been suggesting. He's just staying thereabouts up here. And I think he was for most of the race. And the penalty cost him, unfortunately. That's a learning situation, but I think it was a solid weekend for him.
Yeah, it's as you say, the heat's off him a little bit, may help him. Even internally in the team, they shouldn't be concerned with what people are saying from the outside, but it does have effect on everyone. It gets everyone second guessing things. But once again, it's the car, not the driver, right? I don't think bringing in anybody else is going to get you that big a different result. They're struggling a little bit. Gasly's the benchmark. Gasly is definitely not, running away with the top 5 finishes and struggling there in P15. He's keeping him honest, keeping him close. And as you say, that's an important thing to do, albeit further back in the grid, so it doesn't seem that miraculous. But if you measure, most of the time he was within 3 seconds of Pierre, which is no small feat, I think.
That's the point. I know in context, you're thinking, well, Pierre was up, in P11 and he was down in whatever. But in aggregate, when you took the total lap times and everything else in the race, I don't think he was that far off Pierre.
No.
And I think he had a decent weekend. So kind of, to my point a couple of weeks ago, leave Jack alone. Just let him get his sea legs there. Let him get embedded in the team and he'll figure it out. Speaking of Pierre, he was running close to the points, but Ali on fresher tires passed him and kept him out of the points. Pierre's car, like Leclerc's, was found to be underweight, so he got that DSQ. Tough weekend for Alpine because, like Haas, they also had to change their rear wing. They weren't going to pass that deflection test. So I think in what they felt like they gained at the end of last year, difficult Melbourne for everybody. They come in here, they have to change their rear wing. These are dings that the team has to take. So finishing P11, albeit the underweight thing, that's unfortunate. But finishing P11 close to the points, there's worse outcomes.
Yeah, it is. But they definitely lost a little something.
They did
from last year, and they definitely need to get that back. Never forget, they're a factory team. They're not independent. They should be doing better.
They should,
as Grace always says.
Yes, right. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll, P9, Fernando Alonso, a DNF. Fernando had overheating rear brakes by lap 4, retired, leaving a lot of heavy lifting for Lance. Lance took the reins, managed to run a long first stint on hards, longer than anyone. And by the time he boxed for fresh tires, it was great, but he wasn't really able to climb his way back into the points. But the DSQ did give him some points, which the team needed on a weekend that they were honoring Eddie Jordan. So getting a little points there. And with Fernando Alonso out, another good P9, 2 P9s, 2-point finishes for Lance in a row. Ultimately, though, Paul, Lance was the bellwether for all the other teams. They all watched him start on hards and run longer than anyone on the hards. And they thought, yep, one stopper. Except for one team. We'll talk about them next. But all the other teams are like, holy, thank you, Lance. You're awesome.
Lance. Yeah. He's actually doing a pretty good job this year, isn't he? He's qualifying well. He's running in top 10. He's scoring points. And that's super important for that team, especially if Alonso isn't backing it up. So, I mean, we haven't been the big cheerer for Lance, but I would say this is a very solid beginning to the year. We know, he doesn't get a lot of fanfare at all. No. Probably difficult psychologically, I would think.
I would think so.
Yeah, but doing a good job. Yeah, scoring points is what it needs.
So Lance, take this. All the other people who booed you at the 75th reveal and all that other cars, all that stuff, look, I think you're doing a great job this year. I do. 2-point scoring. Melbourne was tough. We know you like those changing conditions. You seem to do pretty well there. Come to China, not an easy track. Fernando's out. You had to pick up the baton and score some points, and you did that. So I think you're doing a great job. Keep it up.
Yeah.
Now, the team that didn't get it right is the Racing Bulls. Isaac Hadjar in P11, Yuki Tsunoda P16. Isaac, Paul, had a great weekend. He really did. Qualified really well, faster than Yuki.
Yeah.
Great weekend for Jack all the way around. He had a great battle with for Isaac. Sorry, he had a great battle with Jack Doohan. Jack got a penalty for running him wide, but he didn't lose his mind. He didn't fly off and spin it or anything like that. Just a solid weekend. And after Melbourne, he really needed this a lot like Ollie did, right?
Yeah.
Hindsight's, I don't know. Hindsight is obviously 2020, and it's easy to point fingers at the team, but they did get that strategy wrong. As they retained their two-stop strategy for both cars, not just one, oddly, and that dropped them down 25 seconds out of the points, and they just couldn't make their way back up through the field. I assume they thought that other cars ahead of them were also going to stop for two stoppers because of the degradation they saw on Saturday. But with no degradation or limited degradation of the hard, the team didn't box them. The team boxed them, and this was left a lot of hard work to do. And I think basically they ruined a dual points finish here. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, the car's got pace for sure. Yeah. I mean, in a rookie's hands, doing pretty good. His qualifying pace and race pace, but so they got to fix that, get that right. But I think they've thrown away a couple of races where they could be scoring some pretty hefty points. Hadjar has surprised me quite honestly. I think he's doing really good. The qualifying pace really surprised me. He seems to race fairly well. So I think in the future if they can get that right, he should be well on to scoring some points very early in the season.
Yeah, I think so too. Great job, Isaac. Great weekend. Yuki, tough weekend. Had salt in the wound. They had the two stopper. That was bad enough. But then his front wing broke under load, seemingly. Maybe it was debris. I don't know. But hard to know. The team, I'm sure, will figure that out. Yuki had to box for a front wing. That dropped in the back, and he finished P16. So tough weekend for Yuki. It's one thing to do the two stop, be slightly out of the points, but having your front wing break.
Yeah, that was really slow stop for the front wing too.
Yeah, it was
painful to watch. Yeah,
that was tough. Yeah, it was tough for Yuki. So, on the balance though, Paul, I think these cars have pace.
Yeah,
and I think they're a force to be reckoned with in the top 10.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
might be the quickest car in the midfield, really.
Yeah, it might be. And, if it keeps going that way, maybe they ought to, if they're going to swap anybody for Red Bull, maybe put Yuki in Red Bull and move Max to RB. Because Max would probably do well. Yeah. In that. All right. And then finally, you got Sauber, Bortoleto P14, Nico Hulkenberg P15. Gabriel spun on the first lap, so it's really unfortunate. Not what he wanted to do, obviously. He got back into the race, stopped for new tires immediately. Then he stopped again later on, so that was a two-stopper, dropped him in the back of the field. He said basically at that point, he took the opportunity there at the back of the field, dry race, very much like Kimi did. Gabriel just said, look, at that point, it was really just focusing on learning tire management. And it's my first dry race in Formula One. So I wanted to take that time to really try to manage my tires and see how well I could do it and try to get some data from it.
Yeah. That's all you can do once you're that far back. And I mean, they obviously scored more points than they did the whole last year. So that was good. But this one's kind of more typical kick Sauber. Don't say they're Audi. At the back.
Yeah, exactly. Nico had damage to his car, ran off track, ground up the underbody like hamburger, and then struggled for the rest of the day. Had no pace. He said, it was unfortunate. Nico said it was a character building race. So good on
That's what you like.
Yeah, you like those character building races.
Oh, yeah, you love those.
Those are fun. Those aren't they fun?
Yeah.
Speaking of character building race, Paul, tell the world how Harder Racing did this weekend.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Harder Racing won. Isn't that great?
In Mugello.
Yeah, in Mugello, the 12 hours of Mugello. Yeah. We were running in AM class because we're running with, the rookies, which is basically Gray and Hannah and Ian. Well, he's not a rookie, but he is a bronze. So all
young
bronze.
Ian James.
Young Ian James. And yeah, they did an incredible job. It was a very difficult race. There was a lot of rain. There was a lot of attrition, a lot of people spinning off. They kept their heads together, didn't hit anybody. Fell back in the beginning, had some trouble with the tire pressures, figured it out, got the car, up to pace again. And Gray and Hannah and Ian just kept pounding out, and were leading at some point. And they finished second in the AM class, but they beat every single pro team except for one because they finished second overall. So it was super exciting. Great job by them. And, Gray's moving up to GT3. We're racing at Sonoma next week.
That's great.
And that's his debut racing for a GT3 championship. Yeah. And obviously Hannah's racing a GT4, but the way she's performed in her only 2 GT3 races, we've got to start thinking about where she's going from here, because she's performed flawlessly as well. Did a great job as the fastest person in the car, and they put it on pole in qualifying. So tremendous.
Over the whole 12 hours, who was the hot shoe? Was it young Ian James?
The conditions were so difficult.
Yeah. I would think that veteran being Ian.
It was I mean in qualifying, Hannah was just a couple of ticks faster.
Yep.
2/10 or something. But Ian's never really that concerned about that. It's really about he throws his ego out the door.
Yeah.
And he does whatever is best for where we finish at the end. I mean,
right.
Believe you me, he likes to win a lot.
Yeah.
but he doesn't care about a lot of grandstanding, a lot of flag waving for an individual performance over an individual lap. So, he did the early laps in both sides of the 12-hour, and so he could be in the booth and help guide those two through it. And they did a great job. Hannah had to learn how to fuel save at the end. Which she'd never had to do, so she had to learn it on the fly. But ultimately, it got him to P2 overall. So it was
that's great.
Lots of lessons learned for those guys.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's hand out some awards, because that's what we do on the race, and we usually hand out the first award, which is normally the move of the race.
We'll do it live.
Oh yeah, move of the race, Paul. Who'd you get?
I'm gonna give it to Ollie for his moves of the race down there in turn 14, is it, that hairpin?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I said managing the tire, the medium tire, making it go through the end was impressive, but also getting that performance and setting up the passes. And Ocon was the toughest one, but he still got it done, right? So I think it was pretty cheeky, but really good moves, solid drive without mistakes.
Right. Yeah, I had that was a good one. I had Max on Leclerc on lap 53. I liked pretty tenacious, or Ocon on Kimi. I thought was good. So I'll go with Max on Leclerc.
Okay.
Thought that was a pretty fun pass. All right. And the next award is always Donkey of the Race. Sometimes things don't work out well. And you want them to. The press hype says you're the hero, but at the track that weekend, you were the zero.
Yeah. Sometimes you're the stallion, sometimes you're the donkey.
Yeah, it happens. So, Paul, who'd you pick?
I picked Ferrari for unforeseeing their issues in the technical regulations at the end of the race, I think.
It all went wrong.
That hurts.
It all comes into running a team, we have to go through it. We've made mistakes too, but it's the fundamental thing. Wait, you just don't.
Yeah.
You don't mess. It's like the most easiest thing to measure, and it's the thing you don't mess around with, honestly.
Legality plank.
Yeah,
been around a long time.
Yeah, been around.
All right, so I'll pick somebody different. I'll go with the Racing Bull strategy.
Okay.
Just doggedly sticking to a two-stopper when Lance Stroll showed you the way.
Yeah.
You're so anti-Lance that you couldn't just follow his lead. Well, now next time you will listen to Lance Stroll.
Yeah, you'll keep your eye on that guy.
You keep your eye on that guy. All right, and then finally. Woohoo!
We'll do it live.
Yeah. Gonna do the drive of the race. All right, Paul, who'd you get?
I'm giving it to Ollie again. Ollie
Okay.
Berman. Yep.
All
As I
right.
said, just really good race. Came from the back, scored points, made some good passes, made that medium tire work, but maybe better than anybody did. So
good. I agree. I think it's great. It would be easy for me to give it to Oscar. Oscar's great.
Mm-hmm.
He's in the fastest car. I'm going to get edgy here, Paul. I'm going to get edgy with you.
Oof.
I'm going Esteban Ocon.
Really?
Yeah. Ocon. Esteban Ocon. The much put upon Esteban Ocon.
By
who
me,
ends
apparently.
Up in P5. Well, yeah. Who put it in P5.
Yeah.
Where was he? Right on Max's tail. Maybe he should be in that other Red Bull.
Maybe you should. They get along like a house on fire, literally.
When they just.
Yeah.
You thought the Pierre Esteban dynamic was odd.
Could you imagine?
Yeah. Wasn't it Esteban that Max got in a shoving match in the way in the F1? Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, that was funny. All right. Well, that does it for this podcast. Paul's got a pack for Sonoma, folks.
I do.
He's leaving tomorrow for
Home
Sonoma.
for a day, then off to another track. Yeah,
I know.
crazy.
Off to another track. You seen one, you seen them all, Paul.
Oh, yeah, but you love it every time.
Yeah, you do. So anyway, all right. Hey, if you like this podcast, go over to your favorite podcast player, give us a little love. If you watch this podcast on YouTube, hit the subscribe and bell icon, would you? It didn't cost you anything to do. We don't spam you. It comes out once a week. It's not like you're constantly, Park for May every single hour they're posting crap. It's like once a week. Notifications. So hit the follow, hit the like, all that good stuff. Do all the stuff that you're supposed to do. And
behave
a huge
yourselves.
thank you. Yeah, behave yourself. Come on, man. A huge thank you to our Patreon supporters because would not do this podcast without you. You guys are awesome, and we love all of you. So thanks for your support as always. And Paul, as I mentioned, he's off the GT3 race in Sonoma.
Yes, back to my old town.
Yeah,
love
back
it.
to your old stomping ground.
Yeah.
Yep. Gonna go out there, get yourself some
tacos,
some jacuzzi wine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some wine, some good
I know
food.
what you're doing.
Do some
I got
racing.
your number. Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're doing. All right. Well, until next week, we'll go get Grace, find out what she thinks about her McLaren domination. Yeah. And we'll do this all over again. Until that time, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Gamber, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Keep Riverside open. Oh, I've uploaded already. Wow.
Have you?
Yeah.
Good for you. Look at you go.
Thank you. You got something going on tonight, you said?
I got an HOA meeting I got to go to.
Oh, that's fun.
Oh, gosh.
I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take it anymore.
I'm mad as hell. Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Have